Order, order. I call Mr. Paul Scully to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I beg to move that this House has considered e-petition 224-908 relating to leaving the European Union. Not the first petition that relates to that, as you can imagine. Certainly not even this month. And not even one that I've not led myself. Exactly, absolutely. So we return to it. Let me just read into into Hansard the petition so that it can have its full say. Brexit re Article 50. It must not be suspended or stopped under any circumstances. The full details are well known to everyone. The media has covered it fully. The British people must be given the Brexit they voted for. Anything else is not acceptable to the British public. Article 50 must not under any circumstances be hindered, suspended or stopped for any reason whatsoever. The time is here to take action, as there has been excessive feet-dragging, delaying tactics by those opposed to Brexit. It's run for 6 months and it's received 116,470 signatures. Now, Mr. Hanson, obviously this continues to exercise members of the public, just as indeed it does members of this House, and it will continue to do so. We've seen in recent votes how passion run high and different opinions run across this House, but I know, and I'm sure colleagues will have a similar reflection in their inbox of the number of people that are saying a variety of things. I have probably equal number, although I'm a London MP, it will be different from other parts of the country. I probably have equal numbers of people that want to have a second referendum or just stop Brexit entirely, or just actually want to leave tomorrow and just not even go through the process and leave with no deal. And then there's a whole load of people in the middle, including myself. I voted to leave, I campaigned to leave and vote leave. And actually, I know that when I looked at one of the reasons that I was happy to support the Prime Minister's original deal was that it did most of the things that I required for having for voting to leave, but not all of them, clearly. So it allowed us to leave the political institutions of the EU. It allowed us to stop the huge membership fees into the EU each year. It allowed us to end freedom of movement, so that we can have not stop immigration, but have a controlled, better managed immigration system. And it allowed us to start the process and even ratify our own trade deal, although, of course, with countries around the west of the world. Although, of course, where it became imperfect is that we can't put them into place and actually start those trade deals until we finally leave the process after the implementation period and we've got that future relationship agreed with the EU. And then I looked at the main sticking point of that seemed to trouble a number of colleagues, the Irish backstop. There are other issues that concern some people, but the Irish backstop, as we've seen in recent votes, seems to be the main sticking point. And I came to the conclusion, having questioned the Prime Minister, having questioned ministers, having questioned civil servants, that I was a bit more relaxed about the backstop than other members, because I believe it's not comfortable for the EU to have that backstop any more than it is for the UK. So I didn't buy the line that the EU would want to keep us within that backstop permanently, in some sense of a pseudo-permanent customs union. And the reason being was that if the backstop ever came into force, the Northern Ireland would suddenly become the most competitive region of the European Union, because it would have full access to both the UK market and the EU single market. And economically, actually, that's very, very uncomfortable for the EU, because it allows us to cherry-pick the very thing that the EU said right at the beginning of the negotiations. You will not be able to cherry-pick and break down any of the pillars. Well, actually, the backstop allows us to do it, because what it allows us to do is have access to the single market and the customs union, but no freedom of movement. Can you imagine a member state like Hungary, allowing that to sustain for any length of time? It allows us to have single market access and customs union access without having to pay the membership fees in. Can you imagine France, who would then be bankrolling us, allowing that to sustain for any length of time? And of course, when you look at new trade deals that the EU would want to happen, then those countries looking in would say, well, hold on a sec, what is happening with the UK, which suddenly becomes Europe's backstop, because they would not be able to be sure as to what relationship they would be having with the UK for any length of time. So that was my thought process, and a number of colleagues, unfortunately not enough members of colleagues. I think the one good thing about that evening of that vote is it didn't take me that long to vote, to get through the voting lobby. There weren't enough colleagues with me. But clearly the House has had its say, and what I'm really pleased about is that we've now got, after the second set of votes with the Brady Amendment, the so-called Brady Amendment, that we now have a clear signal that we can send the Prime Minister back and say, OK, fine, I know we spent a lot of time negotiating this, but now if you just shift a little bit, I will happily give way. Yes?
So can I ask him why then his leader, the Prime Minister, has said for month and month there will be no deal that does not include a backstop? Why will she have said that? Was she wrong all those months when she said, all those weeks when she said there will be no deal without a backstop? Was she wrong?
Well, at the time, no, she wasn't wrong. At this moment in time, whether there is a backstop or an amended backstop, we'll have to wait and see, because that's the whole point of the negotiation. Because it may be that the negotiation and members are meeting as we speak to discuss alternative arrangements. And this was the key thing about the so-called Brady Amendment. It's to discuss alternative arrangements for the Irish backstop. That may include things like the ability to leave unilaterally. It may include time limitation. It may include a sunset clause. Or it may include what's become known as the Malthouse Compromise. And all of these sort of things need to be discussed over the next couple of days so that we can go to Brussels with a clear ask. But, as I was saying, the amendment saying that we need to investigate alternative arrangements into the Irish backstop, and then chances are this will go through, went through this House, and it's given the Prime Minister now a strong hand to be able to say to Brussels, if we can get this right, then we can do what I hope both sides want to do, and that is the ability for Britain to leave, for the UK to leave, in as orderly a fashion as possible. So that will be of benefit to the UK, to respect the referendum, to respect the will of the 17.4 million people that voted to leave. Also taking on board as many people from the UK that didn't necessarily vote to leave, but appreciate the fact that that was the result of the referendum. And also to make sure that EU can continue to trade seamlessly with the UK. And we can discuss ad infinitum the importance of the UK markets to the EU, just as there are many EU markets that are so important to the UK. All of these things are important. And those of us that campaigned to leave, the vast majority of us just simply wanted to be friendly neighbours with the EU rather than awkward tenants. This isn't just a power struggle. This is just the vast majority of people, including myself, my main motivation was to leave the political institutions, was to just say, you are going in a direction, Brussels, that we do not want to go as a country. So therefore, let's step aside, let's allow you to develop the way that you want to go in terms of a political union, an ever closer political union, but let us go in our own direction, but we still need to cooperate. We need to collaborate. And that's why a deal is so important, because we can talk about whether a no-deal scenario is a WTO scenario, but the problem is, and I'm sure the Shadow Minister will make the point I think he did last time, that actually a WTO, and he's correct to say, a WTO deal, or in no-deal scenario, just covers trade, because that's the whole point of that WTO. It does not cover security, it does not cover education or medical research, which is why a sensible deal, would be so much more collaborative for this country, and it will allow us to continue relatively seamlessly over the coming months. But with this strength to the Prime Minister's hand, I believe that if we can have a clear ask of Brussels that we can develop over the next few days, and that Brussels will actually give a little bit of flexibility, and this is not a position that we sit there and go to Brussels, you know what, no, we're going to go toe-to-toe with you. We just need to have a reasonable amount of flexibility. Then I still believe we can get this deal done within the time so that we do not need to extend Article 50. It will be a huge travesty, democratic travesty, if we go down the line of some of the amendments that we've seen recently. I'll give way in a second. When we actually have to just extend Article 50 for months and months and months, because this will just let people down. However, it will be a situation, if there is a deal on the table and you had to dot a couple of I's, cross a few T's, I can see a position where a week or two might be something. But for some of the 9 months that's been discussed, I'll give way to my colleague and then I'll...
Does my honourable friend agree with me that it's already been 2.5 years since the people instructed us to leave, and that any delay in extending Article 50 any further would be treating them with contempt and a slap in the face for democracy? People expect us to get on with the job now.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. All I'm saying is that if it literally is just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, the deal is there, but there was a technical reason for just a week or two or something like that, then it would be churlish to say, you know, for a decision that certainly I made and a number of my honourable friends' colleagues, constituents would have made, this is a decision that we've taken for 40, 50 years. This isn't a short-term decision. And so let's get it right. So I don't mind a few weeks, but my honourable friend is absolutely right. If it was just nominal, let's extend Article 50 so that we can start the discussion again, so that we can have a second referendum and create, extend the certainty, extend the division that this country finds itself into, then she's absolutely right, that it will be a travesty and people will expect so much more of us. If you would like to, I'll give way.
For giving way. And I certainly welcome always when people are trying to come together and create an opportunity where people can actually discuss things openly, honestly, and possibly come to an agreement. I only regret that not other parties are actually involved in this coming together. It seems to be just something that is done within the Conservative Party. As a member of the Brexit Select Committee, the proposals that seem to be on the table, like a trusted trader scheme or equivalences, have been looked at over the last 2.5 years. And actually, we have listened to many experts in the Brexit Select Committee who have basically ruled it out, and the European Union negotiators have ruled it out. Why does he think that something that wasn't agreed in the last 2.5 years can suddenly be agreed in the next 2.5 days or week with the European Union?
Lady, for that intervention, and there is a good reason why I believe that can happen, and that is Michel Barnier himself, who said just recently, my team and I have done a lot of work on virtual decentralised controls, which will be useful in all hypotheses, even in the absence of an agreement. We will do our utmost not to create a hard border in Ireland. If it's good enough to use decentralised border controls, border checks, that does not require a hard border in the event of a no-deal scenario, why isn't it good enough to actually use it in a deal scenario? So if Michel Barnier is looking as best he can to actually use existing processes in the case of no deal, to avoid putting a hard border in, which will effectively be the responsibility of the EU that will have to do that, because we've said clearly as a government, we're not going to put in a hard border. The Irish government has said they're not going to put in a hard border, so it will have to come from Brussels. They will be the ones that will have to be the final arbiter if they want to insist on a hard border or not. Michel Barnier is clearly saying that he wants to do everything he can, should we leave with no deal, to make sure that doesn't happen. Well, let's hope he can give a little bit of flexibility to make sure that he can do everything he can to make that happen within a deal, which helps us on so many other aspects apart from the Irish border, as I've already outlined. So I think there is more to be done. And as I say, I just think it's more flexibility that we require, not just a wholesale change. We can look back at when the former Prime Minister David Cameron went to the EU to negotiate ahead of the referendum. In my view, he didn't ask for enough, but he didn't get a lot coming back. If he'd got a little bit more from the EU, if the EU had showed a little bit more flexibility at that time, I believe that the referendum result would have been very, very different. We would have almost certainly voted to remain, in my opinion. So I just hope that the EU can look back at that, reflect, and actually say, well, let's not make the same mistake again. Let's not just dig our heels in at this point when we're right at the end of the process. As my honourable friend has said, that this is something that's taken 2.5 years. We've gone all this way Let's not trip up at this last point. The EU just needs to show flexibility. This is not wholesale change. I know in any negotiation, people need to save face. There is always a dance at this point of negotiation. There'll be dance around a little bit so that the Taoiseach can have his can appeal to his domestic agenda. He has a difficult coalition balance that he has to strike. Clearly, I'm sure our Prime Minister wants to be able to say that she's delivered on the promise of the referendum. And all parties here in the House will want to say that they've done their best for their constituents in their country. And of course, Germany, France, Belgium, Hungary, Spain, Greece, all the member states and the negotiating team in the middle of Brussels all want to be able to take their credit for it. Frankly, I don't care who takes credit for it. I think some of us have been working at this for 20, 25 years. We just want to leave the EU now. And I see no reason that if we can all keep our heads, if we can all keep the right language, that we can actually do this within the timescale. I'll just finish very quickly with picking up on the honourable member's point about the collaboration within this place here. In my view, I've looked at this from outside, and there is a reason why there's so many occasions people talk, the media especially, talk about the Conservative Party being the party that's arguing amongst themselves, why there's often two Conservatives on a panel. There's a simple reason for that, in my view, is that the Labour Party leadership effectively wants a general election. I've made the point that the Leader of the Opposition, several times I've made the point, the Leader of the Opposition can write a deal out, give it to the Prime Minister, to be presented back to him, and he'd vote against it because he wants a general election. There are many people in his party that have a different view to that. You have the Liberals that want a second referendum, the Lib Dems that want a second referendum. You have the SNP that have clearly made the honest point they don't want to leave. Fine, that's probably the most straightforward and honest point there. I don't fundamentally disagree with them, but that's the nature of debate. And so effectively, it is the Conservative Party that are the only party, or the half of the House, they're actually trying to debate, yes, we want to leave, but how do we leave? Is it with a deal? What kind of deal is that? Or is it with no deal? And that is the vibrant, often tense discussion that we're having within our party. So that's where we come from. But I'll finish where I started from, and I just made the point, that if we can get together, keep our heads together at this moment in time, which is another reason we need to keep no deal on the table, so we have all of the options. Because otherwise, if Brussels think actually the options are that we leave, we leave, accept the deal, or we don't leave at all, then they'll want to keep us within. That's an obvious thing for them. If you can imagine someone going to an estate agent saying, "I don't want to pay full price for the house. I want at least £20,000 discount, please." And then the estate agents are actually looking over the person's shoulder to find their spouse measuring the curtains, then clearly it somewhat undermines their negotiating position. So that's why keeping no deal is really, really important on the table at this stage. But if we can just give a little bit of flexibility, allow people to pivot, allow people to move and reflect on the alternatives, then I still truly believe that we can keep to this petition, that we can get a decent deal that allows us to leave in an orderly fashion as possible, within the time scale that Article 50 gives us, so that we do not have to suspend, we do not have to stop Article 50, and we can leave on March the 29th. Thank you.
Order. The question is that this House has considered e-petition 224908 relating to leaving the European Union. Vera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen, and it's a real honour to serve under your chairship. You will not be surprised that I'm putting forward the opposite view of the honourable member that we have just heard. We are 7 weeks away from a Brexit, and we have no agreement. We have no agreement within Parliament, and indeed, when I look at the mailbox that I get from people who write to me, we have no agreement amongst the people. Brexit supporters, including the Prime Minister, say 17.4 million people, a small majority, voted for this. So why don't we not have an agreement? Why was the Prime Minister's deal not voted through? If Brexit means Brexit and 17.4 million people voted for it, a government committed to delivering it, and the two main parties committed to Brexit, why are we still arguing? Why doesn't everybody by now have voted for the Brexit deal that the Prime Minister has put in front of Parliament? Because the fundamental flaw of the referendum was that Brexit was not defined. Some who voted wanted no deal or had that in mind. Some wanted possibly something like the Prime Minister's deal. Some wanted possibly something a lot closer to the European Union in a minute, like staying in the customs union. Brexit was not defined. So how many of the 17.4 million people voted for the deal that's now on the table? How many voted for no-deal Brexit? 6 million? 8 million? But never as many as the 16 million people who actually voted to stay in the European Union, which was a defined proposal. I give way.
I thank the Honourable Lady for generously giving way. Does she not accept that members of her party voted to have a referendum, and indeed the former leader of the Liberal Democrats was the first person to say he was going to give the British people a say on whether to remain or leave in the European Union? He didn't say anything about there being different choices. Can she please explain that?
I thank the Honourable Member for her intervention. I am a new Member of Parliament. Obviously, I have followed the discussions about a referendum for many years as well. And yes, we are a party of democracy. I always believe we should give people a say. And since the vote has been so very narrow, and since we are still arguing over what it should look like, how we leave the European Union, the most democratic thing, and I cannot for the life of me understand why more democracy should be less democracy. What is the problem of saying now that we have a defined Brexit proposal, the Prime Minister's deal, or we have a no-deal proposal, but we also still have the option to stay in the European Union? Why can we not put that honestly in front of the people, since we have so much more information about what a Brexit leaving the European Union would actually mean, and people can continue to put their vote behind what they voted for in 2016? I don't mind that. I'm just looking for some clarification. I'm happy to give way again.
Thank you. Could the Honourable Lady please confirm then that the former leader of the Liberal Democrat had no intention, as far as she is concerned, of honouring the result of the referendum that he was the first to promise to give to the British people?
I think I've answered that question before. I honour the referendum result, myself included, by saying we as Parliament cannot cancel Brexit. We had a referendum. We cannot just stand here in Parliament as parliamentarians and say, let's not do Brexit. That is why I believe we need to put it back to the people. That is the most democratic way of going about it. And I cannot see a reason why putting something back to the people, letting people have the final say, why that is something less democratic. I believe that to be democracy in its full sense, I'm happy to give way.
Thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, but would she not agree that we've had two votes on this? The first was the referendum, and the second was the general election, where 80% of the votes that were cast were for parties that wanted us to leave the European Union.
I thank him for that intervention, and I would not agree with him, because I believe that in the general election that we had in 2017, many other elements played its part, and also for the people, it was not clear what leaving the European Union would mean, what the Brexit deal on the table would be. We didn't know anything about a backstop. So why not, now that we know what it looks like? And I trust in people. I truly trust in people. I believe that when I put things in front of people with the honest options on the table, outside the heat of the media, outside the competition of political parties, people will make good decisions, which is why, by the way, I'm very much in favour of citizens' assemblies, and I do believe if we can get to that point, and I very much believe we do have to have an extension of Article 50, because simply we are running out of time, that we are proceeding that by citizens' assemblies, where we are putting the options to focus groups, several citizens' assemblies where people can discuss the options honestly. I believe that people will come to very good decisions, and I have said that again and again. I trust in people, and if people confirm their former opinion, Let's just see what that is. Is it a no-deal Brexit, or is it actually the Prime Minister's Brexit? If a majority, if over 50% majority comes down to a specific Brexit deal, I take it. I think that is a final say, which is why we've always said the people must have the final say. I give it to them. I'm happy to give way.
I noted the Honourable Lady said that the people should be asked if they want a no-deal Brexit or if they wanted the Prime Minister's Brexit. And yet I have heard other Liberal Democrats, not herself then, she made it very clear that if the people were being asked, they were being asked whether they wanted a no-deal Brexit or the Prime Minister's Brexit. Or has she left off that list that she would like it to be a no-deal Brexit, a Prime Minister's Brexit and a staying-put referendum? Could she clarify? Because I hear both, and I'm absolutely not certain what it is the Liberal Democrats are asking for. Because if it's asking two versions of Brexit, that could be an argument, but certainly not putting it back as a three-way referendum.
I thank her for that intervention, for clarification. Absolutely. One option on the ballot paper has to be, because 48% in the previous referendum, and also when I consider my mailbox, when we consider polling, a majority, I want to sort of make progress. A majority of people, if we can trust the polling, would now actually, now that we have defined Brexit options on the table, because how many people actually vote for a no-deal Brexit? 8 million people? Certainly not as many who, in contrast, would vote for staying in the European Union. How many people would vote for a no-deal Brexit or the Prime Minister's Brexit? The fundamental flaw, and I insist saying this, the fundamental flaw of the Brexit vote in 2016 was it was not defined. And this is why, if we are, in all honesty, want to actually do Brexit properly, if we do Brexit, we have to give the final say to the people, because Parliament itself is divided. This is why we are here. I believe in Parliament there is no majority for a no-deal Brexit, and yet the biggest mailbox I get from people who are writing to me seem to be the people who are wanting us to leave without a deal. However, if you nail down to that, it is a majority maybe, or a minority of 30%. It is not an all-out majority. We need to clarify that with the British people. This is why, and I want to make progress now, this is why we need to have an extension of Article 50. I understand the European Union will agree to an extension of Article 50 if there is either a general election or a people's vote on the table. And if we do go for an extension of Article 50, I very much hope that we are giving us and the British people time to properly discuss all the options. And that will mean doing it in citizens' assemblies, an amendment from the honourable member from Bolsonaro that I supported, that we actually discuss the things properly on the table, rather than being drowned out by media hysteria, drowned out by political interests. If people go onto the website of the Electoral Reform Society, post-Brexit, they held a citizens' assembly in Manchester with mostly Brexiteers as focus groups. If members go and look at what the result of that citizen assembly was a very, very, very close relationship, including single market membership and customs union membership, i.e. a relationship with the European Union that I would call Brexit in name only. And again, if that is what people think we should do, because in the end, we do not want a Brexit that damages our economy. We do not want a Brexit that damages our security prospects. If we do want a Brexit that really and truly serves the interest of the people will come to a conclusion that the best deal we have is the deal we have already, and that is membership of the European Union. But hey-ho, let's put it in front of the people. A painless Brexit, a painful Brexit, or a pointless Brexit. I believe the people will come to the conclusion that actually the best deal we have is the membership of the European Union, the deal that is on the table. But let's ask the people again, let's have an extension of Article 50, let's have a proper grown-up discussion with the member of the public, with proper focus groups, and then have a referendum, and let's see what the people say then. Let's ask for that. Let's go for an extension of Article 50. I think the European Union would agree to that. Thank you, Mr. Hansen.
And Maine.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to be able to speak in this debate, because sometimes the ones in the House are so crowded it's quite difficult to actually get in. This is wonderful. I've told that there's hours of it, so it's great. We can really explore all the options. But I think the important thing for me is that we look at the petition. And I've just listened with great interest to what the Honourable Lady said, and she spoke with great passion. And to be fair to the Liberal Democrats, because they contested my seat very hotly at the last election, and they made it a Brexit election, that they have a fixed view that they don't want to leave the European Union and didn't want to. As the Honourable Lady said, that they did offer, and indeed it is on my wall as a poster, Sir Nick Clegg, as he is now, featuring in that leaflet saying only the Liberal Democrats will offer you a true referendum, in or out. And I have to say, I thought, fair enough, that was a fair question. What I'm now looking at, and listening to the Honourable Lady, she has confirmed, because I did want to check, is that actually the in or out that was being talked about in that Liberal Democrat leaflet is not the referendum that the Liberal Democrats want to offer. The new referendum, if it were to be considered, would be a three-way referendum, which of course does split the vote in considerably different ways, would potentially be a three-way... I will give way.
So first of all, I think a democracy is a place where things move and are dynamic. I do not believe that the honourable member is very helpful if she keeps harking back at what has been said in the past. I think we are where we are because we are in a very difficult situation. Does she not believe it is very important to look at the present rather than always harking back to the past?
I completely agree, but I think the past forms part of our learning that we have to learn from the past and forms our future trajectory, let us say. And all I'm saying is the promise of an in-out referendum then, and the promise of an in-out referendum that this House made to the British people is the only way to go. And the three-way referendum that now is being supported by her party, and maybe others as well, of a hard Brexit, as she would describe it, which is a no-deal Brexit potentially, or the Prime Minister's Brexit, or a staying in, could not be countenanced as being democratic. And indeed, my understanding is that the EU, and I don't blame them, would have no truck with us just wanting to kick the whole thing off in the long grass, to have a long and drawn-out process. And I think the Honourable Lady, she wants to intervene on that particular point, did say that, the British public would never forgive us. And they certainly would never forgive us for trying to twist the arm of the EU to say, please can we extend Article 50? So we now could offer a three-way referendum. I certainly can give way.
I hear the honourable member saying that she doesn't think the British public would ever forgive us for asking them again. Does she think that the British public would ever forgive us if there is a serious economic collapse as a result of a no-deal Brexit?
Well, it was quite interesting because I did try to intervene on the Leader of Opposition many, many, many times the other day in the Chamber, because I actually wanted to know whether or not it was the policy of the party opposite to offer another referendum. The economic collapse, I believe, is being a much hyped-up fear factor. But what I'd like to say is that the British public had 40 years of trying out the European project, which certainly wasn't the common market that my now late parents voted for. It became a vote for one thing, and then after 40 years of ever closer political integration, the British public were asked, do they want to re-endorse that membership, or would they actually like to say now, we'd like to leave? And it's not as though we've not discussed this matter about potentially leaving or potentially being unhappy about having treaties foisted upon us. So the British public, I actually think, has a lot of experience, the history that the Honourable Lady wants to not draw on, but actually had a lot of experience of looking at how they were being treated, how they were being talked to, how they were being closely sucked into an integration that they were not happy with, which the honourable gentleman who put forward this petitions debate and opened the debate actually said that that was what many people were unhappy with. They knew they didn't like it. I shall just finish this point and get away. They knew they didn't like it. They wanted to decide to leave and be an independent, self-governing, sovereign nation again. And that was what the argument was made. And the one thing I would say before I give way to the Honourable Lady, having campaigned to leave, and I made it very clear to my constituency I was for leave, and I know my constituency voted to remain, but I made it clear, I didn't hide it, to go down the easy option. I made it clear that I personally believed in leave, but I was one vote. That said, as I said, the British public, who were of a voting age to vote the first time round, realised that they had seen a direction of travel. They kept seeing the direction was ever closer integration. They didn't want to go there. They decided to get off that bus. And the reason I believe the Leave campaign won, if that's the right phrase to use, and I don't think winning and losing, but that's the only way I can say a referendum was won or lost. And I think the reason that campaign was won was because there was more heart in the campaign to get back our sovereignty than there was into saying, well, we know it's not perfect and we know they should change and we know lots of you have got grumbles and complaints over the years and I know we keep trying to change things and they never give us much, but I'm sure they will at some point in the future. It didn't cut it, and I'll give way to the Honourable Lady on that point.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and of course she's making an important point in that people knew what the deal that we already had was. But I take her back to the wording of the petition, which says the British people must be given the Brexit they voted for. Can she tell me what was the Brexit they voted for?
I think it's actually made very clear, and I watched so much of the debate for my sins on the matter. I think it's usually the convention to finish the point that's been asked before you give way again, and I would like to do that. I'm sorry. I think it was made quite clear that there'd be no second asks. I remember hearing that several times during the debate, that actually if we left, that we would take back the control of our borders in terms of we could make our own immigration policies. I'm quite relaxed about numbers, but I know some people aren't, but it meant we could have an even playing field on immigration policy. And it also meant that we would deliver the vote of the British people. We would not come in here then as a parliament and try to tinker it down and water it away. It was bringing back that level of control to the parliament eventually, not right this second, eventually from the European Union. And I think we're getting caught up in the argument at the moment that the control is back to the parliamentarians having control over the people. It was the people that voted to bring back control from Brussels to Parliament, and they expect us to deliver that. And I actually think that was very clear. I will, and then I will give way to the other Honourable Lady.
Thank her for giving way, and I think her answer didn't really answer what I hoped for in asking the question. Isn't it the case that all of us in the House of Commons have different versions of what we might believe an acceptable Brexit deal would look like? Some advocating a close relationship with the single market and membership of the customs union, some supporting the deal that the Prime Minister has brought, many in her own party saying that isn't the Brexit they voted for. Surely the British public are just as split, if not more so, than parliamentarians here in the Palace of Westminster. And actually, if we're going to have the trust of the public, we have to present them with a deal and check whether that's the Brexit they feel they voted for.
Before I take an intervention from the other Honourable Lady, I would just say now, it is becoming, to me, unless somebody would like to iterate a different view, that it seems to me that the official opinion from the majority of Labour members is that they support the view of the Liberal Democrats, which is what they describe as a people's vote. Some people called it a Ramona's ask, depending on how your viewpoint is. But it seems to be that there is a growing chorus now of it's in the too difficult box, so let's put it back to the public. Can I just say at that point, I will be the first to call for best of three, particularly if the wording is not exactly the same as it was the last time. If it wasn't, do you wish to leave or do you wish to stay? Because if the wording was different, I would say, well, you're not asking the same question. If the wording was a three-way split, you're not asking the same question. But I think just getting to the nub of what this petition about is that the public are beginning to be very fearful that we will honour and do what we've said we do. And before I take the intervention of the Honourable Lady, I was at prayers this morning, and I'm pleased that we do have prayers in this place because it concentrates the mind for a few moments. And one of the things that we are asked to do in prayers is not to be concerned with the desire to please. And in this place, we can try desperately to please everyone. And the reality is we can't. What we can do is come to a settled opinion, and we can try and do our best. The difficulty with this is that we have a parliament who overwhelmingly, members voted Remain, who are trying to deliver something that they don't really believe in. And it is, I am not getting away from that, it's a tension. It absolutely is a tension. But we have to deliver what we said we were going to deliver and not just try to please which is the easy option. And I shall take the Honourable Lady from there.
She's very generous of giving way, and she'll be pleased to know that I agree with her. I go to prayers too, and I very much believe that it is important that we honestly discuss and accept our differences and come to a conclusion together, whether you're religious or not. What I would still say to her, though, is absolutely, if we are not delegates of the people, i.e. the delegates, the people have spoken and we are just delegates of delivering something that we believe the people have said. If we are not delegates, we are representatives. Is it not absolutely for us to make a decision according to our conscience and according to what we believe is best for our country? And that this is exactly what we are all grappling with, including the Liberal Democrats, and it doesn't help if you're just denouncing each other all the time and saying, oh, they're Remoaners and this, that, and the other. Isn't it important that we are ordered? Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. I think the Honourable Lady now has had her interventions and her speech and then a few other in between. So I'm going to, if she doesn't mind, I'm going to leave it there that we're going to have to beg to differ. My concern is that we are ending up potentially looking weak because we can't come behind a deal with the Prime Minister. And I know when my honourable friend opened this debate, he said that he believed that he could settle for the withdrawal agreement. And I went to see the Prime Minister before Christmas, and I said, Prime Minister, I truly believe that you are trying to do your absolute very best on this, because it is not, whatever anyone thinks political parties, the Prime Minister had a very difficult job here, and her tenacity in this is astonishing. And I said, but at the moment, whether people believe in leave or remain, we have the absolute right to walk out the door, shut it behind us, and say, we will not put up with any more interference from another group of countries in our legislation. And we can choose, but we won't be obliged. And we have the absolute right to do that at the moment. And I said, but I described it a bit like a sheep pen with a load of nervous sheep, and that meaning all of us guys, that I cannot hover around the idea of a backstop when 27 other people potentially will end up, other countries will end up holding the key. At the moment, we are trying to get back sovereignty, to actually then dilute that sovereignty by 27 other countries having the whip hand over us because they have their own set of agendas. Each country would have the veto. And so it may well be Gibraltar comes up on the agenda. It may well be our fishing comes up on the agenda. So I agree with the honourable member who opened the debate. I don't think they'll want to keep us in there. But my fear is what will they exact to let us out? And I'll give way to the honourable lady.
I'm grateful to the honourable lady for giving way, and she has been extremely generous. Can she agree with me that this myth that people didn't know what they were voting for must be dispelled? Prime Minister David Cameron spent over 2 years trying to negotiate a better deal for the UK by going around and speaking to the European Commission and all the other member states. He then got a deal and put it in a leaflet that was delivered to every single home in the UK. And we do know that the majority of people, 17.4 million people, voted to reject that.
Well, she's absolutely right. And as someone at the time who was worried very much about whether or not there was some undue influence and whether we should be having purge and all those other things that was taxing our brains at that point, even so it was being advocated by the leader of the government at the time. Even so, it was having a lot of big names going around trying to make the case for it and all the money associated with it. The British public, whether people wanted to call them stupid or deluded, and that's some of the things that have been thrown at some of my constituents who chose to vote to leave, they believed they'd had 40 years of knowing what they had, and they didn't like it. They were prepared to take the opportunity to leave. And so it was a split decision, but did anyone ever think it was going to be more decisive than it was? The main thing that struck me was the number of people that participated in the referendum. It was overwhelming. I met with people when I was out knocking doors, saying to me, I haven't ever voted for many a year, and I'm going to vote in this now. So I think it galvanised and engaged people in a way that we often struggle to do. And if we do not get on with this, I think the public will say, what is the point of taking part in any votes whatsoever? We got ourselves out the door for that special occasion. We believed, we were motivated, and I don't know what motivated some people, and other people might have had different motivations, but they still wanted to leave. They wanted to leave the club, and that's why they got out the door that morning and in vast numbers went to vote. So I think this petition reflects that frustration that we somehow are cloth-eared in here, that we didn't get that at the time, that we didn't absolutely wake up to the sheer numbers of people that decided it was what they really had to vote on, that decided it was a topic, if nothing else, had engaged them for decades. No party, no leaflet knocking through their door had got them out of the door. This did. And I know the Prime Minister wouldn't like to hear that some people didn't bother reading his leaflet. Some people felt they had enough personal experience to make their minds up, and that leaflet was not going to change it, and they were glad of the opportunity to have that vote. I don't believe the European Union will just want to have a kick the can down the road delay to Article 50. I agree with the honourable gentleman that opened this debate. If it were for a few weeks, then it may well be something that could be tolerated, so long as it is just to get the I's and T's dotted and crossed. So in that respect, I disagree with the petition. I completely have sympathy with where it's going. And I just want to say that when I went to see the Prime Minister after the big defeat, and I just said I can't vote for it, as obviously 240 other people felt the same way, what I said was, will I want to pay $39 billion? No, it'll stick in my craw, but it's a one-off. Do I want the ECJ having jurisdiction over us during a period of time where we're going through the implementation period? No, but I can stand it. Can I lock ourselves into a backstop? No. So for me, having gone through the debates and the arguments and the thought processes, that is the thing that's got to be fixed, which is why when Brussels said they're not telling us what we want, that's why I agree with the honourable gentleman, now that that has been distilled down, and I'm sure other people have other reasons for not voting, now that's been distilled down, I actually believe, and I hope, they will listen. Because I don't wish to be the teenager trashing the flat, as someone said. I wish us to have a good relationship. I don't want us to be rancorous. And I hope that the people who have signed this petition will accept that we have not ignored the fact that 17.4 million people, many of whom say they hadn't voted for a very long time, got out the door that day because this was the one thing they did want delivered, and it's up to us to deliver it.
Yeah, yeah.
In the absence of any further backbench contributions, I'll call the Honourable Member for Glasgow North, who has approximately between him 2 hours, 20 minutes between the three front-bench speakers.
Thank you, Mr Hanson. It's a real pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and a rare pleasure to be back in Westminster Hall. Before I was appointed as the Chief Whip for the SNP, I used to cover a lot of the Brexit debates that took place in here. In fact, we called it the Brexit Minister Hall because it was so frequent that we were discussing the issue, and it's good to see that hasn't changed. I don't think I'll take 2 hours, but we'll see. It's a rare opportunity to speak, for a whip, as the member for St Albans was saying as well, when the chamber's usually so busy. It is quite an intriguing petition. Two things that jump out of me. First of all, this point of Article 50 must not, under any circumstances, be extended. So, whether that's for technical reasons, as the member for Sutton and Cheam, St Albans said, whether it's because of a general election, or whether it's because of the zombie apocalypse or an alien invasion or any other circumstances. No, the 29th of March must go ahead. Of course, the 29th of March is not some sort of geological fixture. It's not part of the fundamental laws of physics. It's a date that was put in to a piece of legislation largely as a sop to backbenchers. The original EU withdrawal bill simply talked of exit day, which would be defined by statutory instrument. And I do wonder if we might not be in a much calmer place if that original clause had stood. But nevertheless, people are becoming fixated now on this date of the 29th of March. But nevertheless, that's what at least the people who have signed this petition seem to think must happen. And the second point is the point that the member for Nottingham South made, which I want to dwell on a little bit more, is that the British people must be given the Brexit they voted for. Anything else is not acceptable. But what is the Brexit that they voted for? Because all the paper said, all the ballot paper said, was to leave the European Union. And that could mean, quite simply, as the member for Sutton-on-Cheam said, and I suspect what a lot of people maybe did think, was simply leaving the political institutions. The member for St Albans said that people didn't like, they had 40 years of Europe and they didn't like it. Well, you know, I've had slightly less than 40 years, only slightly less than 40 years of European membership, and I did quite like it. And I think perhaps some of the people who voted to leave didn't like the bogeyman that the European institutions had become. Maybe they didn't like the political institutions. Maybe they didn't like the establishment that was arguing for Remain, the political establishment of which many of us effectively find ourselves a part. But the idea that they didn't, just a second, I think the idea that they didn't like their EHIC cards that allow them to access medical treatment wherever they go in Europe, the idea that they didn't like that ability to travel visa-free across the European continent and take advantage of sunnier climates and cheaper holidays, the idea that they didn't like the medicines that they get access to through the European Medicines Agency, the idea that they didn't like the safe regulation of nuclear materials, I think that's maybe a more difficult case to make.
Can I just give the honourable gentleman the benefit of my experience? Because I voted to stay in the European Union when Labour tabled that resolution in 1975. But I voted to stay in a trading partnership, which is what it was sold for as. And, of course, this time I voted leave. I know a lot of my constituents, and probably his, feel the same way. I just thought, as he said, he didn't know anything other than the European Union. I thought he might like the benefit of my experience and age, because life didn't end before 1972, when we weren't members of the European Union.
I absolutely take that point. Of course, if we want to keep going back into history, the European Union was founded as a response to the Second World War. The European coal and steel community to link the economies in such a way, and peace has prevailed on this continent now for longer than at any other time in recent modern history, in the past several centuries, largely as a result of the closer European integration. And she says, you know, the common market back then is very different from the European Union as it was today. But rejoining the common market, or, you know, as some people in this House are discussing, common market 2.0, isn't what the House is currently being asked to vote for. In fact, if anything, we're being asked to move further away from that. And again, when we look at the question of what were people voting for, well, they were told by who's now the former Foreign Secretary, that there will continue to be free trade and access to the single market. The current DEFRA Secretary said we would be redefining the single market, not walking away from it. The current Trade Secretary in 2016 said the free trade agreement we will have to do with the European Union should be one of the easiest in human history. And yet all of that is collapsing in front of our eyes. In fact, you know, what are we looking at right now as we are in here? Shortly, the House of Commons is going to move on to a statement about Nissen in Sunderland and the consequences of what happens if we do plunge off the cliff with a no-deal Brexit on the 29th of March.
At which point, could he wonder why they're not choosing to locate over to Spain, for example, where they've got factories, but they're choosing to go to Japan?
Well, I think that's where the parent company is and where they currently have factories that they can easily locate to. But the point is they're not choosing to stay here in the United Kingdom precisely because of all the uncertainty.
I think I'll have to correct him. I think anyone from this town will say they are staying in the United Kingdom, and I'm sure that those constituencies would not like to hear that he's closing them down.
Okay, well, I take that point, but nevertheless, jobs are at risk. and there is massive uncertainty, and it's all to do with the cliff edge, and it's a large part to do with the cliff edge that we're facing because of Brexit. So from the SNP's point of view, I think there are three things that should happen. And two of those are related. The extension of Article 50, which will have one of the effects of which will be to rule out a no-deal Brexit. As I said at the start, the 29th of March is a date that has just been picked, it's written on a bit of paper. And that's true, frankly, of all of these Brexit negotiations. All of this comes down to people in a room willing to talk to one another. It's not massive rocket science. It's not changing, as I said earlier, the fundamental laws of physics. It's about political will and about the willingness of the negotiating parties to speak to each other and reach an agreement. And, of course, we are still in the European Union. We can continue to have that membership until such a time as something called Brexit does or does not take effect. And the easiest option at the moment, the simplest and safest, best option at the moment, is to continue on those terms, which, as the member for Bath has said, by definition, is the best possible relationship you can have with the European Union. You cannot have a better relationship with the European Union than membership of it, because otherwise nobody would want to be a member. Everybody would want the better deal. Everybody would want the terms and conditions. So, of course, the point has to be that somehow we will have more benefits by leaving because of our relationships with the rest of the world. But there's absolutely no sign or evidence of that. All the trade treaties we were told we were going to have are simply not in place. And I'll give way I'll give way briefly.
Grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. Correct me if I misheard him, but did he not say that we should stay in the European Union no matter what? So he's sending the message to all of those people from Glasgow North who voted to leave the European Union that he knows better and we should stay in.
Well, there were 22% of the people who voted in Glasgow North voted to leave the European Union. 78% voted to remain, and some of the recent analysis suggests that if and when we get to a people's vote, that will be even higher. Yes, I'll give way to them.
He said 78% voted to remain in his constituency. Was it a soft remain or a hard remain?
Well, no, it was to remain under the conditions, I guess. That's highly amusing. It's to remain under the conditions that we currently have. And I'll come back to what the relationship between Scotland and the European Union should be like. But the point is, yes, I believe we should remain. I believe that is the best option. But what should happen now is that people should be given a choice, because now we know what leave looks like. The reality of the Prime Minister's deal really is that when you set the red lines that she set, incidentally, which she set, I think, without even agreement of her cabinet, she announced them in the Mansion House or somewhere else equally grand and that up the street there. She didn't set them after consulting on a cross-party basis that she's now trying to do. She didn't set them after putting forward a proposal or a bill to the whole House to agree. They were set arbitrarily. And if you set those arbitrary red lines, this probably is more or less the deal that you get, because you want to leave the ECJ, you want to stop freedom of movement of people, you want to be able to negotiate your own independent trade deals, and whatever the fourth one was. You know, they're very restrictive. They inevitably get you to a much more damaging relationship than the one that we have, or a relationship that we could have. But nevertheless, this is more or less what the deal. This is the deal that you get if you set those red lines. And so that should be put to the people. Why shouldn't they have that opportunity to have their say? And I suppose the question has to be to the Brexiteers, what are they afraid of? If this deal is so glorious, if this is the deal that is going to launch Mother Britannia into a new position of ruling the waves and global leadership and all the rest of it, then why are they so afraid to put that back to the people? Why would people not be voting for it? The DEFRA Secretary said to me in debate a couple of weeks ago in the Chamber that other countries would be looking enviously at the United Kingdom's deal. So if other countries are going to look enviously at the deal, why wouldn't the people of the United Kingdom in a people's vote?
For again giving way, would he say then that in that campaign the Remain side are going to be honest with some of the things that European Union have got in store, like further integration and a European army? Some of those things will be terribly unpalatable to people, even those that want to stay.
Yes, well, of course, the United Kingdom has consistently negotiated derogations and alternative arrangements, for want of a better phrase, and opt-outs and so on throughout its history. That is the point of the European Union. That's the point of membership, is that you can, within the membership, within the Union, you can help to shape its direction and help to shape its future. What Brexit does is take you out completely. Yes, briefly, sorry.
Does not agree that actually saying we want to become a sovereign country again is a completely misleading phrase, because we are sovereign members, all of it, in the European Union. We're sharing, we are pooling sovereignty. That's the whole point about the European Union.
Yes, of course, exactly. I was going to get that on. I was going to get onto that exact point in my sort of peroration, which I'm sure members can probably guess what that is going to be. But of course, the problem is that this deal isn't good enough, that it's been rejected by Parliament already, and now the Prime Minister has had to accept that it needs to be renegotiated, and we have to have these magical alternative arrangements. So if we can't agree, but that in itself kind of demonstrates that if this House cannot agree, if the parliamentarians, whether we're delegates or representatives, either way, if the House cannot agree on the shape and form of Brexit, then it has to be put back to the people. It either has to be put back in a people's vote or in a general election. And I can assure the House that the Scottish National Party fears neither of them. Very briefly, and I will wind up.
Very briefly, I was quite encouraged to hear him saying about, the deal. If there were amendments to the deal, could he support it?
Well, no, because we support remaining in the European. We support remaining in the European Union. Now, the Scottish, and that does bring me into my final point, is the treatment of Scotland in all of this debate. As I said to the Honourable Lady, 78% of my constituents voted to remain. It was one of the highest in the United Kingdom. So I want to listen and understand to the people who voted leave, but I am not afraid or ashamed to stand up for the vast majority of my constituents. 35 residents of Glasgow North signed this e-petition as well, by the way, and it's quite interesting if you look at the geographical spread of it. But since, on the day after the referendum in 2016, the First Minister of Scotland said that we needed we had to respect both the result of the 2014 independence referendum and the result of the 2016 UK-wide referendum on the European Union. And the Scottish Government has consistently put forward alternatives and compromises and ways forward that could respect the result of the European Union, of the Brexit referendum as it happened across the United Kingdom. I should incidentally say, I meant to say at the start, that the SNP voted against having the Brexit referendum in the first place. We didn't think it was necessary. So again, we're not quite even in the position of the Liberal Democrats who now want to revisit an answer they didn't like. But the Scottish Government hasn't been listened to at all. We proposed ways of retaining, for example, single market or customs union membership for Scotland, and potentially indeed for Northern Ireland, parts of the United Kingdom that had voted to remain, and none of that was paid attention to. So, in fact, what has happened is that the promises were made to people in Scotland, both in 2014 and in 2016, have been broken. The major promise in 2014, of course, being that if you voted no to independence, then Scotland was guaranteed to remain a member of the European Union, and that, of course, has proven to be false. And so I think in that instance, the people of Scotland will come to the conclusion that it's not the European Union that's failing, it's the Union of the United Kingdom, and that they will choose their own course at the end of the day, whether that's on a referendum or in a European or in a general election, choose to take back control for themselves, because, as the member for Bath alluded to, independent countries nowadays are actually defined by their interdependence. You know a country is independent precisely because it is a member of the United Nations, or because it has chosen to pool sovereignty through the European Union, or it has chosen to join any number of international organisations. That is the positive trend that the world should be aiming for. And instead, Brexit represents a retrograde step. I was coming to a conclusion, but if she's very keen.
Just because he did mention having a second referendum and potentially asking Scotland to go into the European Union again or stay in or whatever, would he want a wall?
No, a wall, sorry.
Well, for the hard border.
A wall for the hard border.
Or do you think there could be other mechanisms? Does he think other mechanisms could be brought about that you wouldn't have to build a wall?
No, I think that would be completely unnecessary. It's clearly there are going to have to be arrangements that are made for the border on Northern Ireland. And if it's possible to do in Northern Ireland, then it really ought to be possible to do when the day of Scottish independence comes. Of course, the best solution would be to revisit this whole issue through a people's vote and ultimately give the United Kingdom, the people of the United Kingdom, the option to remain in the European Union. And I think I can leave it at that.
Paul Blomfield.
Very much, Mr. Hanson. And it's a pleasure to wind up for the opposition with you in the chair, as ever. And can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Sutton and Sheen for his introduction to the debate. I didn't agree with absolutely everything he said, as you'll not be surprised to hear, but he set the framework for the discussion in a characteristically thoughtful way. So thank you for that. I think he was also right when he talked about the passions around this debate. And I think that the numbers of members here today reflect the fact that we have spent several days, several weeks, several months exercising those passions, and clearly there's an important statement in the chamber at the moment. And there are many issues that we could discuss, and many of them have been touched on. But I do want to try to focus on the specific issue of the petition in relation to the extension of Article 50. And we do need some honesty in this discussion, and I think that the Prime Minister could have given a lead, but she could have, in some of her answers over recent days, recognised the complexity of the issue and the different challenges that we face. But she tends, on this, as in so many times, to have reduced it to a simple sort of binary yes, no, we will, we won't. And she's been digging herself into a position, as she has so many times over recent years, over the last couple of years, on Brexit, which will change when she's confronted with the cold dose of reality. It started with the phasing of the negotiations. Members will remember that the Prime Minister insisted that there would be no separation of the discussion on withdrawal from the discussion on our future relationship. And the first Brexit Secretary, the Right Honourable Member for Halton, Price and Howden, promised the row of the summer back in 2016 on that particular issue, until he rolled over without dissent because he recognised that that was the way that things would inevitably go. Then there was the transition. Now, recognising the risks of a cliff-edge departure on the 29th of March, we argued back in August 2017 that there should be a transitional period, that business shouldn't have to adjust to different sets of regulations as we left. No, said the Prime Minister, with number 10, and I quote, saying, "It was a weak attempt to kick the can down the road." Now that comes from the can-kicking experts. But when she secured the transition in March 2008, she claimed that it, or as she then described it, the implementation period, was one of the great achievements of her negotiations. Then we, of course, had the mantra of no deal is better than a bad deal, and some of the nonsense around that has kind of fueled the idea that we might crash out on whatever terms, or in the absence of any terms on the 29th of March. Now, clearly it was nonsense, but it was endlessly repeated. No deal is better than a bad deal. Endlessly repeated until the Prime Minister struck a bad deal. A deal that will shrink the UK economy by 4%. So then she slipped into reverse gear with a new mantra: support my deal, because the alternative of no deal would be a disaster for the country. Oh, well, of course.
Gentleman, explain to me then why it seems to be that the leader of his party would take no deal off the table. Isn't that a bit like a trade union going over to Europe and leaving strikes at home as an option when they were negotiating?
I think we were very clear why we would take no deal off the table. It is, as the Prime Minister now acknowledges, as the Chancellor has spelled out, as the Treasury analysis has demonstrated, it would be a disaster for the economy. It would, well, if she'd let me finish the point and then she can intervene again. It would, by the government's analysis, shrink the economy by about 10%. It would be particularly negative in the impact it has on our manufacturing areas, on many of those areas which have been so left behind in the period of economic change that we've seen over the last generation. But I'll give way again.
I'm grateful for the honourable gentleman for giving way, because as I understood what the government figures said, the economy wouldn't grow as much in the short term as it would have. It wouldn't shrink, from what I understand it to be. And secondly, surely, if you are entering into a negotiation and you actually take your main negotiating lever off the table, it means you're going to roll over and cave in, which seems to be the message that we're getting from the leader of the opposition and his party.
Well, she is right, although playing with words on the Treasury analysis. It is not that the economy would shrink 10% from the point that it is now. It would shrink 10% from the point where the Treasury project it would otherwise be. But the net effect is we would be 10% worse off through a no-deal Brexit, 10% less money for public service.
The chair is here and the dialogue is there, and I prefer the chair to be addressed as part of the dialogue by both members.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. 10% less money for public services, 10% less jobs, 10% less wealthy than we would otherwise be. The Treasury were right to share that with the British people. And on the... Well, could I complete this point first? Because the second issue is about the value of no-deal Brexit as a negotiating lever. It only has value as a negotiating lever if people on the other side of the negotiations believe that you're serious. Nobody thinks that no-deal Brexit is in British interest. Nobody believes that it was actually influenced the outcome of the negotiations. So I'll have to give way to the honourable member.
He's been very generous, and his tone is so emollient, and I just actually wanted to reassure him, because I was terrified when I heard the Chancellor say each household would be £3,000 a year worse off if we voted to leave, and actually the economy's done very well. So just have a little faith, really, is what I'm trying to say, is these predictions are often way out of kilter.
Well, it's always fascinating, Mr. Hanson, to hear Conservative members rubbishing their own chancellors and former chancellors. The economy may not have lived up to the former chancellor's worst expectations, but the pound has crashed. And we have seen us move from being one of the fastest growing economies to one of the less fast-growing economies. So there has been a negative impact already, but as the honourable member will recognise, we haven't left the European Union yet.
It is absolutely clear that all Brexit scenarios leave the economy worse off. And wouldn't he agree that the negotiating position, keeping no deal on the table, is a little bit like this cartoon that I read the other day, which was like, I put, unless you give me what I do, I'm going to shoot myself. Isn't that the sort of idiotic negotiating position that nobody believes in anyway?
I think, actually, I didn't see the cartoon, but that was from a Mel Brooks movie. She's right to characterise it in that way. That's why it was the idea that threatening no deal was going to be a great negotiating card for us, never had any credibility whatsoever. So, I will.
The economy has mentioned the pound, but the pound versus the euro is pretty much at the same level now as what it was in 2012, and people weren't talking about the economy crashing out then.
He will know, and we could measure the pound at different points, but he will know that the pound has fallen since we took the decision to leave. Now, that did produce a short-term benefit in additional exports, although the consequences are now beginning to impact because the components are part of many of those exports are now coming in at higher prices. So, we could debate these issues for a very long time, but I don't think that anybody has yet argued successfully against my contention, which is the Chancellor's contention that no deal would be a disaster for the country. Which is why, of course, Parliament has voted twice now against leaving without a deal. So, phasing the negotiations, transition, this ridiculous mantra on no deal, we're here again with Article 50. Every time she's confronted with the growing reality that the 29th of March may not be a feasible departure date, the Prime Minister insists we're still leaving. She seems to be in some sort of parallel universe, but one that's not occupied by many of her cabinet. The Foreign Secretary said on Thursday we might need some extra time. The Justice Secretary has told the Daily Telegraph he agreed. They reported that 9 cabinet ministers believe that too. The ever-thoughtful business minister, the Honourable Member for Watford, wrote yesterday, we have to grasp the nettle of an extended Article 50 period. I'll be interested when the Minister follows me by winding up the debate, which side of this argument within the Conservative Party he's on. I'm looking forward. We'll come to that shortly. But when she's questioned, the Prime Minister just keeps hitting the repeat button. She knows it's nonsense. And what's worse than that, she knows that everybody knows she knows it's nonsense. But it didn't have to be like this. The Honourable Member for Glasgow North has highlighted the original drafting of the EU Withdrawal Act, which provided for multiple exit days for multiple purposes. Now, that was sensible. It was the government's proposal. But to throw some red meat to what the Chancellor described as the Brexit extremists of the European Research Group, the government fixed the 29th of March for all purposes on the face of the bill. It was a gimmick, it was a time-consuming gimmick, and it was an irresponsible gimmick. From the opposition, we told her it was a legislative straitjacket and the Act would have to be amended. We tried to help her out and tabled amendments to that effect. But the government rejected them, rejected proposals that would have given Parliament control over the dates. So now we're in the position where the Prime Minister is preparing to return to Brussels following last week's vote. And the Honourable Member for Sutton and Cheam talks about the EU giving some flexibility. Let's just remember what the Prime Minister is returning to do. She's returning to ask the EU 27 to change the backstop that they didn't want, but which she pressed them so very hard to accept. The backstop is a UK government proposal. And you can imagine their bewilderment when, having conceded it, when pressed by the Prime Minister, they're now faced with a situation in which she's saying, well, you know that backstop? We've got to change it.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does my honourable friend agree with me that if the Prime Minister had made a little bit more effort to secure a deal amongst her own members of Parliament, it might have been easier for her to get a decent deal with the European Union?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. He makes a point which I'll be coming on to echo in a moment. But the Prime Minister's immediate task that she set herself is to reopen the deal that she said just 2 weeks ago was unreopenable. Just remember her words on the 15th of January, Mr. Hanson? And I quote, "Some suggest that there's a fourth option, to vote this deal down in the hope of going back to Brussels and negotiating an alternative deal. However, no such alternative exists." And it's worth remembering too, with all this focus on the backstop, that the backstop was not the primary objection for the majority of us who voted to reject the deal. It was the impact that the deal would have on jobs and the economy. Now, the Honourable Member for St Albans is right to say that we have the right to walk away, but we've also got the responsibility to the British people to outline the consequences of taking that sort of step, and we've exercised that to some degree in terms of the impact of no deal. Mr Hanson, with the country despairing of our politics at the moment, with business confidence collapsing, the Prime Minister might reflect, and this comes to my honourable friend's point, she might reflect that it didn't have to be like this. If at the outset she had said, "Look, the British people have voted to leave the European Union, but by the closest of margins, it's a mandate to end our membership of the EU, but it's not a decision to rupture our relations with our closest neighbours, our main trading partner and our key allies." If she'd said that, therefore, we'll seek a deal which reflects that position, a deal that's right for people's jobs and livelihoods, in a customs union close to the single market, in the agencies and partnerships we've built together over 45 years, and the Honourable Member for Glasgow North mentioned some of them. Retaining the rights and protections for workers, consumers and the environment, and keeping up with those rights, keeping up with the EU as we move forward, then she could have secured a majority in Parliament. She could have united the country that had been so bitterly divided by the referendum, and the issue of the Northern Ireland border wouldn't have existed. But instead, I will.
I'm grateful for the honourable gentleman giving way. I just wondered, in terms of the customs union that the opposition are suggesting, can he just quickly outline which bits, when I said my brief list of the reasons that I voted to leave, which ones of those would be available in terms of leaving the institutions, stopping the payments, freedom of movement and being able to do trade deals?
Well, I thank the Honourable Member for the intervention. He'll recognise that freedom of movement has nothing to do with membership of a customs union. I mean, our position is that we can't be a member of the customs union of the European Union because we can no longer be a member of the EU, but we should have a customs union which replicates those current arrangements. And that is in terms of the common external tariff. It's recognising we wouldn't be able to negotiate our own trade agreements, but we would benefit from the trade agreements that exist, which we've been part of negotiating with 70 countries as a member of the European Union, and we would hope to have a say, not a deliberative say, but a say in future trade agreements. Does that answer the Honourable Member's question?
Maybe about the institutions and the fees that we might pay as well.
I think the Honourable Member is raising a much broader question. I mean, clearly, there would not be fees in relation to customs union. There clearly will be, and the government have acknowledged that there will be payments, and the Minister might want to comment on that, in terms of other schemes and partnerships that we might want to be part of going forward. There's no fees in relation to the customs union, but there would be if we're part of Horizon 2020, Framework Programme 9 on research across the European continent. We would pay in and we would get out. There are many other schemes if we were part of the agencies and partnerships. Take Euratom, the European Atomic Energy Community. We are spending an enormous amount of money replicating arrangements which we could have continued to benefit from as a member of Euratom. There's no additional benefit for the UK. It's just a separation of functions because of the obsession with the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, which has never ruled anything in relation to Euratom, which is of any concern to the United Kingdom. But my point is that there was, at that juncture after the referendum, an opportunity to reach out to the majority in Parliament, who would, and I campaigned to remain, but I recognise the outcome of the referendum, the majority in Parliament, which existed for a sensible Brexit. But instead, she let the ERG set the agenda, set the red lines, box her in, leading to this deeply damaging proposal which the House rejected so overwhelmingly a couple of weeks ago, putting her party before her country, just as David Cameron did before her, and the country's facing the consequences. Now, it's not too late. As an opposition, we are willing to talk about that sensible Brexit deal, the relationship with the customs union, single market, rights and protections, agencies and partnerships. But if she won't go there, to answer the question I was anticipating from the member from St Albans, but she hasn't asked, we will consider the option of a further public vote to break the impasse. But whatever happens over the next 7 weeks, we cannot and we should not rule out an extension of Article 50.
Harris.
Thank you, Mr Hanson. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship again. And you've obviously heard my speech many times before, which is why I believe you're just about to scoot off to do better things. So, but I'd like to thank you for your, the generous way you've chaired this. And I'd like to start by thanking the honourable member, my friend for Sutton and Cheam, for the very thoughtful way he introduced this whole debate. He, like I, campaigned to leave. He, like I, knows that there is actually many different ways of leaving, the British people did give an instruction to their government, and he, like I, know that the government is intent on delivering on it. I guess I should answer a couple of the points that have been raised in the debate. It's always a pleasure to hear the Honourable Lady from Bath telling us that we cannot cancel Brexit. So, in general, the Lib Dem policy is that we can't cancel it. So what we'll do, we'll try any other means to undermine that result whatsoever, be it parliamentary or otherwise. And I struggle realistically with the Lib Dems when they say pretty much anything, because I remember in 2010 them campaigning vehemently to get rid of tuition fees, and then as soon as they got into government going exactly the reverse. So she's not campaigning to cancel Brexit now, but I absolutely know she is. So I think she should just be a bit more honest in the debate. I happily give way.
The Liberal Democrats, including me, have never made any beans from the fact that we think the best deal we have is staying in the European Union. But we acknowledge that we had a referendum. So what I'm saying is, absolutely, we have had a referendum. We now have a deal. We need to clarify with the British people whether they think that this is actually what they voted for. That is a very democratic way of going forward. But if there was such a referendum, of course, I would campaign to stay in the European Union.
It's remarkably clear for a Liberal Democrat. And she did mention in her speech that the biggest number of people that are writing to her now are people arguing for a no deal. It's not a surprise when they've seen the political class argue like we have done. What people from the outside see is people trying to stop Brexit from happening. And that's why people get frustrated. I happily give way to my honourable friend.
Clarification with the answer that he's had from the honourable lady there. Can he remember any group campaigning saying, and when we've got the answer, we'll make sure we come back again and double check? Because, I don't think anyone thought we could unpick all this without doing some forms of negotiation. Did anyone make that case to double check and then go back again?
To the best of my knowledge, I didn't hear anybody mentioning that in the course of the campaign, in the course of the debates that we had in Parliament that led to the referendum being granted in the first place. So no, I think I can honestly say I never heard that up until possibly the day after the result of the referendum. Actually, I was going to come on to my right honourable friend's contribution, my right honourable friend from St Albans. As there are now two chairmen in the room, I think I should make the point that they both need to go back to Mr Speaker to ensure that she gets higher priority on the Speaker's list, because more people need to know and need to hear what the Honourable Lady has to say on this subject. She made a huge amount of sense. I think she underestimates her value to this place and to this debate. She said that I campaigned to leave and I was but one vote. She was joined by 17,410,741 others, of which I was one, and that's a decent-sized number. I completely get her point, which is why I do get slightly anxious in some of these debates, that we are not seen to be cloth-eared in here. We have a referendum result that we are delivering. on. And so I agreed with pretty much every word she said, including about my contribution to whatever debate there was around the deal, because I absolutely voted for the deal first time round. With my experience, personal experience of the European Union, I actually do trust them to deliver on the matters that they sign up to. So I was happy to go into the lobby I did. But I can guarantee to her that the government is not going to ignore the fact that 17.4 million people voted in the way they did. It's always a pleasure to listen to the Honourable Gentleman from Glasgow North, now too silent as the Scottish National Party's chief whip. And when I was a whip in government, it was a pleasure to deal with him because he is always courteous, polite, completely on the money, will never go back on a word that he says. So, and this is true in this particular case too. He's a passionate European. He wears his heart on his sleeve on these matters, and he articulated that very well today. And so I guess I should ask him to forgive me for being exactly the same, but in the reverse position. Because I tend to believe that I would love to quote parts of his speech back to him. Maybe I can do it over a beer sometime. The bits about staying within a union, you have a chance to shape its future and all that sort of stuff. But we'll leave that for another day. But I did listen to his contribution, and I completely understand. Of course, I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
Does he question my honesty about being a passionate pro-European?
I absolutely do not. I just wish her party was as honest as she was. When it comes, the Honourable Gentleman for Sheffield Central, it's very interesting, and I always enjoy our debates. And really, I enjoy debating anybody from the Labour Party front bench, because it's interesting to see which bit of the Labour Party turns up. Is it the bit that wants a second referendum, or is it the bit that maybe the Honourable Gentleman agreed with his party leader, that actually Article 50 should have been activated the day after the referendum? Is he part of the democratic socialist movement that actually believes you should respect the result of the referendum, or is it more the actually politician, the kind of authoritarian Labour Party that believes actually the metropolitan intelligentsia part of the Labour Party that believes that the people got this completely wrong? Now, I know him because he is a very wise, long-standing pro-European as well, principled in these matters, and I don't doubt his sincerity in his argument, but I do struggle with his party's position, because it seems to be ever-changing. They must have heard that I've started speaking outside. I'd like to get that sort of response. It's fascinating to see people talk about taking no deal off the table, as he did. Not the wisest thing to do in any negotiation. And he says it's... Of course, absolutely.
If he thinks it's not the wisest thing to do, why did the Chancellor of the Exchequer reassure businesses that that's exactly what would happen?
Because we're working towards a deal, and there is a deal on the table. Parliament's actually given some indication when it took back control last Tuesday that we are going... There is a deal that is possible out there, and we want to deliver a deal. But a responsible government plans for all eventualities, and we're planning for a no-deal eventuality, exactly like the European Commission is, exactly like 27 other member states are, in all the announcements they make about what might happen in a no-deal circumstance, which should give him some comfort, limited comfort, that the fears that he has about a no-deal situation are not as bad as he might believe them to be. But if we were to take no deal off the table, as it would be disastrous, his reasoning is that it would be disastrous for an economy. I take it then, if you extend that logic to its obvious conclusion, that we're trying to persuade fellow Labour MPs not to contest the 1922 general election, because we all know that a Labour government leads to worsening economic conditions and makes people poorer in general. So therefore, the obvious conclusion is anything that makes people potentially poorer you should not do, and therefore you wouldn't stand as a candidate in that general election. So, I thought I might rise to that, but anyway, you want to go for a cup of tea. I understand. So I'd like to thank all those that are participating in today's debate, and especially Clive Grenville, who set up this petition. I think he should be pleased with the numbers of people he got to sign it. Fundamentally, it's a petition that's asking the government to respect the outcome of the 2016 referendum and thereby deliver on our withdrawal from the European Union as millions voted to do. And let me assure the Honourable Member for Sutton and Cheam, my friend, that those that signed this petition, that the government remains committed to delivering on the instruction to leave given to us by the British people. We remain clear that our policy is not to revoke Article 50, nor to extend, delay or hold a second referendum on exit. Happily.
On that specific point, just for the sake of absolute clarity, is he saying then that there are no circumstances whatsoever in which the government will seek an extension of Article 50?
If I may repeat very carefully what I just said, we remain clear, the government remains clear, that our policy is not to revoke Article 50, nor to extend it, delay it, or hold a second referendum on exit. And perhaps it would help this debate if I re-outline the now very familiar reasons why the government has taken this position. And I will remind honourable members of the immense progress we have made towards delivering that exit that we as a government and as Parliament were entrusted to deliver. Firstly, let me deal with the overarching question of revoking Article 50. As I've made clear, the government's policy remains that we should not and will not revoke our notice to withdraw from the European Union under Article 50. To revoke Article 50 would not only be to betray the vote of the British people in 2016, it would betray the mandates on which the vast majority of us in this place were elected at the last general election. Let me emphasise again to honourable members the strength of that mandate and the clarity of the instruction given to us by the 2016 referendum that illustrates why we must respect the result and why government policy is not to revoke Article 50. In the summer of 2016, millions of people came out to have their say, trusting that their vote would count, that after years of being ignored by politicians, their voices would be heard. This vote enjoyed a higher turnout than any previous referendum, and 17.4 million of those people voted to leave the European Union. It's the highest number of votes cast for anything in the UK electoral history, and the biggest democratic mandate for a course of action ever directed at any UK government. And as I've reminded the honourable gentleman for Sheffield Central before, and he will remember this, the passion, and the House a few times, the passion that people were voting with was quite extraordinary. Those of us who were touring polling stations on the day will remember Pencilgate, where people refused to put their X in the box using a pencil for fear the government would rub it out. The battles over trying to get a pen into a polling station to vote were quite extraordinary. Happily...
Does he agree with me that I actually, because I was campaigning for Leave and went around various areas, I actually was talking to people who said, do you know what, one of the reasons I am voting is because this vote adds up nationwide. Sometimes there's no point voting because you can't change the Member of Parliament one way or another, and I don't bother voting. But this time my vote has the full weight of counting nationwide.
I heard that many a time. No, it's not a call for proportional representation. It's just be careful what you wish for. I was elected under proportional representation for the first time in 1999, and whilst it's a lovely system to get me elected and for the European Parliament, it is not a good system if you want a democratic choice to be delivered. This result was one which Parliament then overwhelmingly confirmed by voting with clear and convincing majorities in both its houses for the European Notification of Withdrawal Act. European Union Notification of Withdrawal Act. That is, Parliament, informed by the will of its electorate, voted to trigger Article 50 and leave the European Union. Further still, in the 2017 general election, over 80% of those who voted for parties who committed to respect the result of the referendum. Not only the government, but also the opposition stood on and were elected by manifestos which committed to respecting the decision of the people. We've made promises and commitments to the people we represent. From when we held the referendum to when we as a Parliament voted to begin the process of implementing its result. The British people must be able to trust their government both to effect their will and to deliver the best outcome for them. And as the Prime Minister has said, this is about more than the decision to leave the European Union. It's about whether the public can trust their politicians to put in place the decision they took. To do otherwise would be to undermine the decision of the British people, to disrespect the powerful democratic values of this country and this government. Therefore, we cannot and must not frustrate the will of the people by revoking Article 50. I understand that, despite this, there are those who advocate for a revocation, extension or otherwise delay of our Article 50 notice. In order to deliver the exit that people voted for, if Parliament is clear that it does not wish to deliver a no deal, as it expressed last week in the House, then the obvious conclusion to that is we must secure a deal. The only alternative, as the Prime Minister has laid out, is revoking Article 50, and this is not government policy, and it would be, as the Prime Minister said, to disrespect the biggest vote in our democratic history. The Prime Minister has also been clear that other delays, such as extending Article 50, do not resolve the issue of the deal with which we leave the European Union. And moreover, reminded at the House this week that the 29th of March 2019 exit date is one which Parliament itself voted for when it voted to trigger Article 50. The government is clear on its notice to withdraw under Article 50 as instructed by the British people. So, I reiterate again to honourable members that this government is committed to delivering the result of the referendum. It remains our policy not to revoke Article 50 and not to frustrate the outcome of the 2016 referendum, which I trust will please the petitioners on this occasion. Instead, we continue to work to overcome the challenges and seize the opportunities to deliver on the result of the vote by the British people in the summer of 2016 to leave the European Union.
Paul Scully has 1 hour and 20 minutes to sum up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hollowbone. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'll get my 40-slide PowerPoint presentation ready, if you don't mind. No, I just wanted to take a few moments just to say thank you to everybody that's contributed to the debate. There's been some knockabout fun, shall we say, but on the whole it's been dealt with in the right spirit, the spirit that actually people are looking upon us in this place to hold these debates in that way, such that we can differ, we can have a different opinion, but we can hear each other, we can listen to each other. More important is you can hear a lot of things, but unless you listen, you never learn. And that's where remember, after this process is all finished, yes, it was 52%, 48%, we do have to work out how to heal the divides, both in Parliament, but most importantly out there in the country as well, to make sure that we can secure a Brexit that works for everybody. And in securing that Brexit, I hope the petitioners and the people that have signed that, the 116,000 people that have signed that petition, can be rest assured that the way the government is going through this process and the way that a lot of us on this side have spoken, that we do not envisage, we do not want to, certainly not revoke Article 50, but we don't want to extend Article 50. A couple of us have talked about the fact that my honourable friend from St Albans agreed with me that if there was a technical position that I don't think anybody's going to die in a ditch about a couple of weeks, but there has been a sense that when you look at what happened in the voting lobbies a few weeks ago, when you had my colleagues, my honourable friends from Broxtowe and North East Somerset in the same voting lobby, celebrating about the same result, if we don't end up with a deal, one of those people and their colleagues is going to be sadly disappointed. They cannot both be right from the positions that they took at that time. So the obvious way to get through this in time to be able to leave on exit day on March the 29th is to make sure that we secure a deal. And I would hope and I would urge, as I said right at the beginning, that we put forward a reasonable proposal to Brussels in a reasonable way that allows them to have the space that a lot of our colleagues over here in this place have had over the last week or so ahead of that vote. What changed over the previous weekend was the more emollient language from all sides of the debate, which allowed people to just calm the temperature down a little bit. And if we can do the same with Brussels and appreciate the fact that all they need to do is just consider the fact that if they're looking at not putting at alternatives in the to avoid a hard border and no deal, surely they can just look at it again and give us what we need to make sure we can get a deal through at this stage with regard to the Irish backstop. So that would help us, clearly, but that would also help the EU. Without encouraging other people to leave, all we want to do is to be able to do our thing and allow the EU to progress the way that they want to do. Let's be friendly neighbours, let's not be those awkward tenants, and let's do that in the most clear way that we can so that we can all process and move on from here. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered e-petition 224908 relating to leaving the European Union. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.